its glory, the Nevarran court is a viper's nest of infighting. Its sitting ruler Ionis is weak and frail after several decades on the throne. Many whisper that the power behind his throne lies with his friends and advisors, who seek to use him for their own political advantage. At the town of Hunterfell, a small distance westward along the Minimeta, a plot to depose Ionis and stabilize the Nevarran throne is underway, spearheaded by the 60-year-old Caspar Pentaghasts. Before the year is out, Ionis will have been overthrown, and Caspar Pentaghasts will have been crowned the first of the Pentaghast kings. Caspar Pentaghast, known to the Nevarrans as Caspar the Magnificent, was famous for his dragon hunts, which remains part of the Pentaghast legacy to this day. Fighting with a silver sword, he would lead sorties of hundreds of knights out in the winter months to kill the beasts, and the Pentaghasts famously wore ebony armour made of dragon bone and scale. Caspar himself is said to have lived until the age of 127, ruling for 60 years. On his final day of life, he was still actively sparring in Spry, shaving off the beard of his own great-grandson Mathas the Glorious with the blade of his sword, and declaring, "You are a Pentaghast. Have some care for your appearance." Mathas the Glorious never went unshaven again. Caspar the Magnificent, after winning his sparring match with Mathas, retired for a nap and never woke up. His body remains interred in the Grand Necropolis, still holding its silver sword. In the light of such a legacy, the Pentaghast kings held their throne for the next 300 years, losing control only temporarily in the wake of the Third Blight during the Towers Age. After 15 years of skirmishes with the Darkspawn, the city-states of the Free Marches, including Nevarra, were significantly weakened. It was only at the urging of the Grey Wardens that the Empire of Orlais and the Tevinter Imperium sent armies to bolster their forces. But when the Archdemon Toth was slain at the Battle of Hunterfell, and the armies converged upon the Nevarran territories, the March estates were taken by surprise. Orlais and Tevinter seized upon the weaknesses of the city-states to expand. In 325 Towers, Tevinter occupied Hunterfell, and the ancestral seat of the Pentaghasts, and Nevarra city itself fell to the Empire of Orlais. This action would cement a rivalry between Tevinter, Nevarra, and Orlais that would last until the modern day. Hunterfell was the first to break free of Tevinter rule in 349 Towers, 24 years after its occupation, but it would be a full 40 years before Nevarra city would be reclaimed by Caspar II, who, for his efforts, has become one of the nation's most revered kings. But the impacts of the Tevinter and Orlesian occupations would continue to cause differences between Hunterfell and Nevarra city, as in 387 Towers the Chantry was split by the Schism, and the Black and the White Divines were established in Tevinter and Orlais respectively. With Nevarra trapped between the two empires, it saw its fair share of forces for the next century, as the Andrastian Chantry called for 4 separate exalted marches against the Tevinter Imperium. The last of these exalted marches would end a mere 2 years before Andoril awakened in the Fourth Blight began, when Darkspawn would once again strike the Free Marches. Regardless, Pentaghast rule would go uninterrupted, from Caspar II until the reign of King Nestor Pentaghast. By the time King Nestor had come to power, much of the old concerns that had peppered the reign of Ionis had emerged again under the Pentaghasts. There were fears that the Pentaghasts were weak, ineffectual, and that their Mortalitazi mage advisors were pulling the strings behind the throne. Popular discontent at the infighting that arose under King Nestor was only properly seized by General Tylus van Markham, a hero who had fought in the Fourth Blight defending Nevarra. Claiming to be a descendant of the famed Cordulus Draken, founder of the Chantry, Tylus van Markham rode the waves of popular sentiment to tear down the Pentaghast regime in a coup in 537 Exalted, declaring the Pentaghasts decadent and corrupt. King Nestor was assassinated, stabbed 16 times atop his throne, and the rest of the Pentaghasts fled to Hunterfell. Under Tylus van Markham, Nevarra would undergo its greatest development yet. He launched several border wars against the Orlesians in 538 Exalted, and shaped Nevarra into a full territorial nation, carving out lands and establishing the Nevarrans as a military power. This was not done solely with the use of Nevarran troops, however. A marcher force, colloquially known as the Fallen, which had dedicated itself to battling the expansion of Orlesian power during the Exalted Age, fought at Tylus's side. In 540 Exalted, during an attack at the fields of Gislain, King Tylus was almost slain, but the fallen held the Navarran line against a mounted chevalier attack, dying almost to a man to defend the king's retreat, and in so doing earning their fame in all but Nevarra as the reason for Navarra's continued independence. But whatever the reason, the Van Markhams turned Nevarra itself into a true state, expanding it well beyond a simple city-state and establishing the Kingdom of Nevarra as the bulwark that holds back the expansion of the Orlesian Empire into the modern age. The Van Markham dynasty was a short one, with only 4 Van Markham kings sitting the throne during the expansion years. During this time, the deposed Pentaghasts worked to rebuild their fame by pursuing a legacy of dragon hunting, and by 615 exalted, the creatures were driven to extinction. The final Van Markham king left no male heir, but did have a daughter, who married into the Pentaghast line and united their 2 houses. The transition, occurring at some point within 680 steel and 699 steel, was to bring about the second Pentaghast dynasty and the restoration of the Pentaghast throne, which has lasted into the modern era. Throughout the Storm Age, the Pentaghasts began the work of restoring the political connections lost during the Van Markham years. In a bid to secure a lasting friendship with the Empire of Orlais, the Pentaghasts approached the heirless Etienne I Valmont, then Emperor of Orlais, in 782 Storm, persuading him to set aside his empress of over 17 years, and instead take to wife Princess Soteria Pentaghast. The plan backfired. By 797 Storm, Soteria had been unable to provide Etienne I with an heir, and so the emperor sent her to a cloister so he could instead marry his mistress. Nevarra was rightly furious. A Pentaghast war party rode into Orlais to reclaim their spurned princess, and an ages-old feud was rekindled, which would not come to a head for almost 50 years. In the years that followed, Nevarra bided its time. Soteria, the spurned princess, would go on to marry an Orlesian called Gustave Le Fleur, and helped to raise his son Aurelian as if he were her own. All appeared for the moment forgotten. But in 846 Blessed, while Orlais was busy expanding its reach into Ferelden, Nevarra at last launched its counterattack for the spurning of Soteria, striking hard and fast at the regions of Perendale, Ghislaine, and Arlezan. Initial interest in the lands of Perendale began during the dragon hunting years, but continued due to silver mining and extensive mineral goods under the hills under the regions west of Ghislaine. Orlais responded, reclaiming Ghislaine and Arlezan over the next 25 years, but losing Perendale and much of the surrounding territory by 870 Blessed. Perendale today retains much of its Orlesian influences, with a carving of lions slaying the dragon over its main gate, and with distinctive Orlesian architecture, and many of the citizens there cling to the hope that one day their town will be restored to Orlais. In 860 Blessed, the sitting Pentaghast king died, and a power struggle for the Navarran throne began. Princess Soteria's stepson Aurelian put forth a claim for the throne, calling himself Aurelian Pentaghast, despite sharing no blood relations to the family. The Pentaghasts revolted, exiling Aurelian in disgrace, and naming him the false Pentaghast. He journeyed to Orzammar, and remains the only human to have ever joined the ranks of Orzammar's Legion of the Dead. Eventually, it was another Pentaghast king who ended up sitting on the Navarran throne, as the Pentaghasts alive today have always come to expect. Their constant presence for 600 years has led to dissatisfaction, and this culminated in 910 Dragon with an internal revolt attempting to overthrow King Marcus, orchestrated by Pentaghast branch families. During this incident, King Marcus and his advisers arrested and executed a number of the Pentaghasts, including Lady Tigana, the king's steward and potentially his spymaster, and her husband Lord Matthias, the parents of Cassandra and Anthony Pentaghast. The children were spared execution but sent to live with their uncle, and Mortalitazi serving at the Grand Necropolis. Anthony would go on to become a famous dragon hunter, a fame that would cost him his life in 916th Dragon, when a group of blood mage apostates seeking dragon's blood for their rituals murdered him for refusing to aid their scheme. His murder led to the burning desire of his younger sister Cassandra to join the Templar Order, but it was her uncle Vestulus, then raised to prelate of the Mortalitazi, who steered her instead towards the seekers of truth. In 922 Dragon, on the Day of Dragons, also called the Day of Black Skies, Cassandra prevented an assassination attempt on Divine Beatrix III, eliminating a group of magically controlled dragons with the aid of the Circle Mages of Val Royeaux and saving the Grand Cathedral. Her reward was to be raised to the position of right hand of the divine, a position that she would keep into the tenure of the next divine, Justinia V. But the Pentaghast influence is felt across Thedas. The current King Marcus still clings to power despite waning health and presence of mind. His heir apparent, Ferdinand, is best known for his research into dragon's blood and its uses, and has declared no interest to assume the throne. Both remain childless. To those on the outside, Nevarran politics has been in the hands of the Van Markhams and the Pentaghasts for too long. But to the two families now intertwined, there are no mentions of a coming fight for the throne. With 14 branches to the Pentaghast line, and 4 more stemming from the Van Markhams, most in the line of succession believe that another Pentaghast will sit the throne once Marcus and Ferdinand are gone. As they are fond of claiming, the Pentaghasts are Nevarra. That's it for me, guys. Thanks for watching. If you like this content, please check out my Tumblr and my Patreon. Special thanks again to my Patreon supporters, without whom videos like this would not be possible. And thanks as well to Penbridge for some help working out the dates around the Steel Age. I'll see you again in part 3.